My name is Dr. Brad Allen. The spelling is my first name B-R-A-D, my last name A-L-L-E-N.
And state what you're running for.
I'm running for Congress in the 24th Congressional District.
These are my 5 main questions. Why are you running for office?
I looked, I did this once before, got in late when Obamacare came in, because I feel that our health care is very important, and I didn't like where that was going. I still don't. I still think changes need to be made. But when I look around now and I look at all the problems that have happened, we have inflation that's through the roof, the highest it's been in 40 years. We have crime and defund the police that is getting out of hand. Homelessness is rising. We have immigration problems. We have the war in Ukraine. We're talking about renegotiating the nuclear deal. We have education, where we're getting more concerned about teaching first and second graders gender or CRT instead of math and science. I looked around and there wasn't one thing I thought was going in the right direction. And I thought politicians keep doing the same thing over and over again. And as a doctor, I look at the way you need to do these is you need to identify the problem and come up with a problem-solving solution. And so when I looked at this many problems, I thought I can either keep sitting on the sidelines and do nothing, or finally get back and get involved and try to change how we're dealing with these multiple issues.
What are some of your greatest accomplishments?
Well, I was a pediatric heart surgeon, and I worked at multiple institutions in my day. I've written nearly 100 papers, multiple book chapters. I have lectured both in Asia, Europe, and the United States, all over. And I ran a department of pediatric cardiac surgery at the University of Texas. So I'd say most of my accomplishments have been in medicine and in research, which is partly what I want to bring. You learn how, and in medicine, you learn how to look at a problem and then decide how do you solve it. And I think that's what's needed more in this country. What
do you believe the community needs most right now?
I think as I said, there's so many issues but if I had to pick 2 right off the bat, I'd say inflation. It's killing small businesses. It's killing people. Even if they're getting higher wages, they can't. The average family can't make ends meet. And the other would be crime, and because one of the biggest roles of government is to keep people safe on the streets, and I think they're failing in that right now.
What do you want voters to know most about you?
That I'm not the typical politician, that I'm a doctor. I approach problems in a different way. As I've already said, I approach problems or difficulties we may be having, issues we may be having, by looking at what's the root cause of the problem. And then we look for solutions. Politicians, I think too often, you came in to me with a broken arm, we would never just give you a pain pill and say, oh, that'll solve your pain problem. Politicians tend to do that. They never identify the problem and come up with a way to solve it. They just keep throwing things like money at it, which would be like me giving you a pain pill to take care of the problem.
If elected, what are some of the main projects you plan to tackle?
Well, I've already talked about that to some extent. I think the main projects I want to start addressing the issues such as inflation. What we're doing to small businesses. There were, in the first year of this administration, there were there was 130 hours of new paperwork, over 200 billion in regulatory costs. That beats the last 2 administrations' first year by a wide margin. We need to start rolling that back and get small businesses back and get them working. As a small business owner myself, I know that. And so I think that would be one project I really want to. I'd also, of course, we want to address the other things I talked about, education. We want to address I want to address health care, because I think as I said a long time ago, you want to fix health care, you don't send a politician to do it. You need somebody who actually has been through the roots to do it. And as I said, crime, and we need to better support our police. And I think there are ways of solving some of our crime problems now that are just not being done.
These next questions are from my managers.
Fine.
How do you plan to help businesses and community members recover from the pandemic and get back to a sense of normalcy?
Well, I think first of all, we caused some of this small business problem by continuing lockdowns. As a doctor, I knew a year ago lockdowns didn't work, but they caused huge social and economic problems. A lot of businesses went out of work, closed because of what happened to the pandemic. If we'd stopped the lockdown sooner, we wouldn't have had the economic problems we have. The other thing which I talked on before, this administration has put in place more regulations and more hours of paperwork than the last two administrations did in their first year. So I think we need to stop, we need to cut back on our regulations, we need to cut back on the paperwork, and let small businesses start to thrive a little bit.
Okay. And what should the federal government be doing about nuclear energy, drought, oil drilling, inflation, rising home prices, and homelessness?
I think the problem with that question is you've hit me on 5 or 6 topics that are almost impossible to give you one answer that would cover all. You have to address each one individually. As I've said before, that's the problem. Politicians say, oh, just throw more money at it, and that's their answer a lot of times. We'll just put more regulations in, that's their other answer. As a doctor, I don't do that. If you come to me with a problem or a complaint, I look at your problem, and then I look at how can we solve that problem, and I have to look at the consequences of the solutions each time. So you can't just have a one-size-fits-all for all those problems. Each one is separate, and that's the problem with what goes on in Washington. They don't look at it this way.
Do you want to maybe just touch on a couple of topics individually?
As I said, for small businesses, I would cut inflation. I'll tell you one thing we keep doing with inflation. Politicians love to keep spending money as though it's free. They keep printing it. Oh, and they bring back a new park, and they bring back this, and aren't they great? Except what happens is when you spend that money, you're bringing 10% inflation with it because you're devaluing the dollar. Next, you're raising the national debt. We have over $30 trillion in national debt. So we need to stop printing money, stop all these earmarks of all these quote-unquote free things that politicians bring because they're not free. You're paying it either now or later. And that would help us solve inflation. I've already said cut regulations and cut the man hours of paperwork to help small businesses thrive. Homelessness we keep throwing money at it, but that's not the issue because homelessness keeps rising. I think first of all you have to realize 75 to 80% of homelessness people are either addicts or mentally ill. We have to look, if we're going to look at that, we have to separate them from the families and kids. They shouldn't be all thrown into the same place. So we need to first separate that. Then we need to help the problem, which the problem is mental illness and addiction or lack of a job. And those are two separate issues. We need to address these people separately. And we also need to give them incentives. Maybe if they get a job, they get even better housing, something to give them an incentive to get a leg up. But we have to help them to get the leg up. But we can't treat all homelessness like they're all the same people.
Okay. And then my final question that I'm asking everybody is there anything else you would like to share?
I think the biggest thing I could share with people, I think there's 2 things I would share with people. The first is that my first question is, have you had enough? I mean, with all the things that are going on today, I think one of the first things you need to ask yourself is, have you had enough? If you have, then stop voting the same way you have. You can't keep doing the same thing and then keep complaining about what's happening. And the second is that I bring a different mindset. I'm not the politician. I'm a problem solver. That's what I've done my entire career. That's what I did in research. I learned how to look at something and then come up with a solution. So I think those are the 2 things. I think people keep voting the same way and then complain that things don't change. What's happened to this country right now, you can't say, oh, it's not Salud Carbajal, it's not our current administration. Of course it is. And you gotta then wake up and say, okay, if that's the case, if I've had enough, I'm going to change. And maybe put somebody there that's just not another career politician so we don't keep doing the same thing.